and Dr. Watson go on a camping trip, and after having dinner and a bottle of wine, they retire for the night. Okay, so they retire for the night, and after some time, Dr. Holmes wakes up and he nudges his friend. And then Watson looks up and he says that Watson, look up and tell me what you see. And Watson is like, I see millions and millions of stars, Holmes. And then Holmes says, what else do you deduce from that? And then, Watson thinks for a minute and he says, well, astronomically, it tells me that there are, millions and millions of galaxies and probably billions of planets. Astrologically, I think the Saturn is in Leo, and horologically, I deduce that it's approximately 3:15. Meteorologically, I suspect that tomorrow we're going to have a great day. And well, theologically, I can see that God is all powerful, and we are just a small, insignificant part of this universe. And he asks Holmes that what do you think? And Holmes just looks at him for a minute, and he says, "You idiot! Someone stole our tent."
Okay, so jokes apart. So hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you. We hope you're safe and sound. I'm Bhagesh Nemade.
And I'm Sakshi Rane, and we are honored to say that today's episode is hosted by us. So, let's start with the brief introduction about the Dhruva, our astronomy club.
Okay, so guys, do you know the what Dhruva means? Yeah, so Dhruva means who guides the mankind in the night to find the right path. As most of you have already guessed, the main motive of this club is to develop a scientific temper among the students by promoting interest in astronomy as well as to provide the opportunities to interact with research institute and exchange ideas.
Okay. So this is our first podcast episode, and we really hope that you like it and you enjoyed it.
Okay, so for this first podcast event, our first speaker is Miss Nishita Sangvi, who is currently studying a bachelor's degree in her aerospace, aeronautical, and astronautical engineering. So how exciting, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
She is recognized as gravitational wave science commentator at the Laser Informative Gravitational Wave Observatory, which is also called as LIGO India.
Okay. She has participated in the NASA Citizenship Program project and International Asteroid Search campaign. She is currently doing an internship in Indian Institute of Indore, which is about the theory of relativity, relativistic electrodynamics, relativistic kinematics, relativistic mechanics, tensor calculus, and general theory of relativity and black holes. Wow, that was a mouthful. Anyways, her area of interest is gravitational waves, active galactic nuclei, that is AGN, black hole, and neutron stars. So,
Yeah, so guys, before starting our podcast, please, if you have any questions regarding any topic, add your questions in our WhatsApp group, or you can just raise your hand. We will unmute you. Yeah, so we can
okay.
start.
So, hi, Nishita. Can you unmute and, turn on your camera?
Yes, hi. I just want to check if I'm audible and visible.
Yeah. We can see you
Great,
very well. Okay. So,
great,
how are you
great.
doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. So, how was your lockdown?
It was happening, very happening. Yeah.
Well, what did you develop a new hobby or something like that?
Uh, well, I think I got myself into a lot of online projects and internships because I think lockdown has given us all a lot of time. It was definitely a very different experience from getting your life stuck at one point to starting back again. And I think most of us have tried to make something productive out of it. So yeah, even I tried to get into some new learning and new projects and all of that. So I think overall it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, like we saw your LinkedIn profile and we were like, oh wow, oh
Thank you.
wow. It was just I was just scrolling down and down and what is happening?
Yeah,
So
most of it happened during the lockdown. So thanks to lockdown
Yeah,
for that.
well, yeah. So
yeah.
how did you develop an interest in aeronautics and astrology, astronomy?
I think aerospace and astronomy has always been a part of my professional interest for a long time. But I think the one very defining moment in my life was the Mangalyaan mission that happened. And then since then, I thought I would want to pursue this further. And yes, ever since I've been trying to pursue this, I've been currently pursuing aerospace, and I'll get my degree soon. So then after that, maybe we'll try to go ahead with it.
You're in MIT, right? ADT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that, ADT had that course too about, aerospace and aeronautics. So I was very surprised that, this course is there too, because a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah. It's not very widely offered. If you look at the number of universities in India that offer aerospace, it's not a very widely offered field. I mean, you'll see a lot of computer science engineering courses, you'll see a lot of mechanical, you'll see a lot of electrical, but aerospace is very niche in a way. So yes, and not a lot of colleges offer that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something wrong with Bhagesh's network. Anyway, let's move forward. So, a lot of people have a misconception about aeronautics and networkings and everything. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about aeronautics that I have observed personally is that people don't really know that it's different from aerospace. Aeronautics and aerospace are quite different in the sense that aeronautics deals with entirely, aircraft and stuff that's still in the air. But aerospace, we go a little beyond that. Even in India, if you look at the kind of courses that are offered by universities, they will offer an aerospace degree, but the curriculum that is a part of it is mostly inclined towards aeronautical. And so I think that one misconception is that the differences and the nuances are not really understood very properly. Secondly, I think we don't really I've noticed that people don't really understand that if you want to get into astronomy, aeronautics is a very different field. They are two very different, they're not interconnected per se, because one field you are talking about the universe and space and stars and all of that, and the other on the other hand, it's about aircraft and it's about spacecraft and all. So while one really discusses about the formation and the physics of the universe as a whole, the other is more of an engineering tool to understand that concept. So I think these are certain things that I can think of at the back of my head.
Okay, so are astronautics and aerospace the same?
Again, I think it comes down to if you really want to branch out, I think it comes down to satellite and spacecraft, and so it comes down to orbital mechanics also. So these fields, even though more or less you can put them under the wide umbrella of aerospace, it depending on the kind of subjects that you're covering in each one of these, they would have a little difference. However, aerospace and astronautics can be called as interrelated, interdisciplinary subjects.
Okay, all right.
So there are two observatories of LIGO in the whole world that are in Caltech, California, and in MIT. Yeah, is that right?
So there are actually, the LIGO project is more than just two observatories. We have the LIGO Virgo, as well as we have some supporting smaller observatories in different parts of the world. And one up and coming LIGO observatory is the one that is going to be commissioned in India, I think sometime in the next couple of years. So overall, it's a set of 5 to 6 observatories. if you're looking at LIGO observatories per se, then it will just be 3, considering the India LIGO also that is going to be commissioned soon. But we do have some supporting observatories as well.
Okay,
Wow.
great.
Okay. That is news to us. We didn't know. We actually were searching for that, and we found out there are only 2, even the collaborations are between MIT and Caltech, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we didn't know that there were a lot more observatories of LIGO.
Yes, there are supporting observatories. So what they do is they take up all the validation work. So whatever LIGO finds out, these supporting observatories try to validate and verify that. So they don't really work on a scale that is as large as LIGO, but they definitely are a part of the LIGO project network.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us a little bit about LIGO?
Yes. So LIGO was first started in the States, and so the whole concept of LIGO is that it is a project where we're trying to look at the gravitational waves. And essentially, this idea was formulated based on the principle that gravitational waves, they travel through space. So naturally, they would also travel through the Earth. And what we want to do is, with the help of LIGO, we want to be able to detect these gravitational waves. And if you have seen LIGO, it's essentially this L-shaped equipment. You have a long 2 arms that are perpendicular to each other in the shape of L. And basically what happens is you have light that is sent out in both of these directions. And we try to work on the fact that if there are gravitational waves, they would basically stretch and squeeze the space-time. So naturally, they would also stretch and squeeze the Earth. Now, the magnitude of this is not a lot, and that's why you're getting laser light into the picture. So that even if there's a tiny stretching and squeezing happening, you should be able to detect that. And that is done with the help of something known as constructive and destructive interference. So the LIG, or the I in LIGO, stands for interferometer, which is essentially interference. So we're trying to create an interference and we're trying to detect that, and then we're trying to see if this particular interference that is created is related to the gravitational waves, if it's related to the stretching and squeezing of space-time that we want to detect. So the LIGO project is that it was started to detect these gravitational waves, and we did manage to detect a few. And then after the first gravitational waves were detected, we figured that we might need a second LIGO in some other part of the world, because the first one, we're not really sure whether what we're detecting from this LIGO instrument is a gravitational wave from black holes or not. So then we got a second one that is for validating. So these 2 LIGOs that work together can collectively tell you if there is a gravitational wave signals that are passing the Earth. And then eventually scientists figured that, all right, these 2 are telling us about the existence of gravitational waves, but we're not able to localize, where are the waves coming from? What is the source and all of that. So while we can try to look at a historical database and then try to validate the results with theoretical models that we have created, it would make a lot more sense to have a third LIGO. And with the help of this, there is a principle called triangulation, where we're trying to get information from all these 3 LIGOs, and we'll be able to localize and point out very precisely at one part of the sky and say, okay, this is where the gravitational waves are coming from. So that is the purpose that LIGO India is about to be serving very soon.
Wow, that is great, yeah. That is great.
Yeah.
That's really great.
It's definitely a very fascinating project, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like kind of speechless right now. I don't know what to say. Okay, so moving on. let's talk about your internship with NASA. Now, how was your experience, during that internship?
So to clarify, it's more of a project than an internship. And so while getting direct internships in NASA requires you to be a citizen, you can be a part of a lot of their global projects that they have. They have a bunch of citizen science projects that you can be a part of. So I was a part of a few of those projects. And I think the experience was very. There was a lot of learning. There were new things we learned to work with new kind of software, and so this global project that NASA has is. They have come up with these projects because they have a lot of data coming in from the observatories and from the telescopes, and they by themselves will not be able to classify all of this information. So what we do is we try to give them a preliminary classification or a preliminary validation that they need. And so with the help of the citizen science projects, people from across the world are trying to work on these analysis, and then they're trying to give certain results that NASA will later work upon. So I was a part of one of those few of those projects. So one of those projects involved classifying galaxies. So telescopes take a lot of images and they have a lot of data coming in. And while you can deploy machine learning algorithms to identify which category of galaxies a particular one falls into, the problem is that machine learning at this point is quite rigid. So what you can see with your eyes, your machine will not usually be able to detect that. So there is a possibility that you have something that looks like an elliptical galaxy, but turns out it's not, it's spiral. So a lot of things your algorithm will not be able to identify. So this project involved people trying to sit and analyze a bunch of galaxies and see what category it falls under. And this combined with their machine learning algorithms gives them a certain probabilistic model of different classifications. And this is what they later work on. So this was one. Another project that I worked on was an asteroid search campaign. So NASA also has a lot of, it is collaborating with the Catalina Sky Survey, where they try to take a lot of images of asteroids. And there are a lot of moving objects that they detect, but we're not sure if every moving object is an asteroid. So we work on a software called Astrometrica, where we import all the images and then we try to analyze if those images have asteroids in them, or if it's just any random moving object that is not of any concern to us. And this preliminary analysis is sent back to NASA, and then they try to detect all of these objects, and they will perform further analysis and further calculations and see if these can be marked as specified asteroids. And once that happens, you also get to name the asteroids. You have a chance to name them after whatever you like. So these are certain projects that I had worked on. It was definitely a very new experience, I would say.
So
Okay.
during this project, were you, it was a team project, right? So there were a lot of
Yeah.
people, so how was that thing? Like, were those people were, from all over the world, right? Or were they from, one particular part of the world? So like, for example, if this
Uh,
project is, only for Indians, or this project is for some other, country or something like that.
So while the project is global, you get to decide your own team. So naturally, we went ahead with a very localized team, people that we knew, people that we could work with. So in my case, the team was people from India. It included people from like different parts of the country, and but it was mostly people from India. So you get to be in teams. You can have localized teams of your own. And sometimes, if you're not able to find a team, then NASA helps you out by connecting you with people. But they do ensure that it is usually people from your country or your place, so that you feel a lot more connected and it's a lot easier to work on a team project.
Oh,
Okay.
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 Yeah.
So, can you just share a little bit about your experience during your internship with Elite Techno Groups of robotics and automation?
Oh yeah, that was one of the first internships that I had done.
Yeah, I
Around
saw
that
that.
time,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a long
So
time ago that I was, kind of confused that if you'll remember it or not. That
yeah, no,
time.
no, no. It was, I do particularly remember that because that was around the time when I had a little bit of interest in robotics and automation because it is something that is up and coming also in space engineering and all, because you do want to automate as much of your space structures as possible.
Yeah.
Say you have your Mars mission and all of that, you would try to reduce human interaction as much as possible and automate all of those structures. So I wanted to build upon that, and so I took up this internship. And it was more towards the mechanical engineering side of it. So we tried to, integrate sensors and different components to make a mini vehicle that is that can detect obstacles and that can detect temperature, pressure, humidity, and all of that, and it can work on its own. And it was a semi-controlled, semi-automated vehicle. So yeah, I think it was definitely a good learning experience.
Okay.
Wow, that's great. That's
Great.
great. We do have a robotics club, but
Mhm.
personally, I never was that interested in that. And Bhagyesh, as far as I know, he's pretty interested in all those things. So I was not
Yeah.
surprised when I asked that question.
I see. Then Bhagesh, you
Yeah.
should definitely get into automation for space engineering. It will
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
be a
Sure.
very
Sure.
helpful thing.
Yeah. 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 Sure. Yep. So
Okay.
basically, most of the crowd you present here, I guess they are waiting for this question. That they have the query that what is the eligibility criteria for NASA and LIGO for an for an internship and all. If
Hmm.
someone wants to enter that internship, so what's the criteria?
Uh, I'm very sorry to inform, but if you want a proper internship in NASA, you have to be a US citizen. Because it's a
Yeah.
government organization, they are very strict about the security and all of that. So, internships for Indian students are not really possible, but you can be a part of their projects. So, you have to be on a lookout for you have to keep going through their websites, and they have their Instagram pages and Twitter pages, and they're always coming up with some sort of projects where they do need a global workforce. So you can look out for those things. Another things are NASA supported projects. So they are not directly under NASA, but NASA does recognize them because a lot of the data is taken from NASA database. For LIGO, I think there are definitely going to be a lot of opportunities for Indian students, given that LIGO India is about to be commissioned. If you are a student in with a certain amount of experience in electronics and instrumentation, or data analysis, or even pure astronomy and astrophysics, then you have a very good chance of interning at LIGO, because these are the three fields that they are they're looking for people in. And electronics and instrumentation is it's a huge part of the LIGO project, because a lot of it just comes down to proper precision and accuracy of their equipment. So I think for interns, that would be, if you do have an interest in that field and if you do have some relevant experience, you can definitely apply for internships in LIGO. You can check out the LIGO India page. I think it's LIGO. I'm not really sure what the website is, but yeah, you can just go check it out. They do have a section where they take up students for research groups. And right now, due to COVID, it's not really very happening. So the most you can do is be a part of some online projects where you're doing data analysis. But once this is done, there will definitely be a lot more opportunities coming up. You can also check the IUCA website, because IUCA, a lot of professors and researchers from IUCA are a part of the LIGO project. So if you are able to, get a certain role under one of those professors, you can directly work on the LIGO project as well. And there are definitely opportunities for people in their final year also in bachelor's.
Okay.
Okay. So, like Abhi, you said that a lot of people can't do an internship in NASA, but you can take part in projects. So, Abhi, I am a computer engineer. I'm studying computer engineering. So, how can I be a part of that project? Because I don't have any background related to, this thing. So, like, astronomy, obviously, I know things about that, but I don't have a specific, degree or a course related to that. So, will I be eligible for that, or, do you have to have some kind of experience?
Definitely, you will be eligible for that because I think they are very basic. You can learn all of the. So they do have before you start your project, they do give you some resources for training, and you can train via all of those resources. And it's very it's not so difficult to get build certain knowledge on all of those topics. So I think your degree will not really have an impact after a certain point of time as long as you have an interest and as long as you're building up on it. I think it's fine. Very basic knowledge of astronomy will help. It will definitely help. And if you do have basic understanding of any language like Python or C or C++, even very basic, you can always build upon it later. So that shouldn't be an issue at all.
Great, great. Like, LIGO was out of question because, like, basically, I'm not all the three things that you said. I'm not eligible for that anyways. So maybe research.
Oh, no. You are. Computer science. You will definitely be eligible for a lot of their data analysis roles. So if you're proficient in any languages or any software, they're definitely looking for students who can help them with that.
Oh, okay. Then there's
it's definitely an option. Please don't block it out. You would definitely have a chance of getting an internship there.
Oh, guys, are you listening?
Okay.
So around 40% of Indians are working, in NASA. Obviously, or most of us know. Why do you think are most of the Indians leaning towards working in NASA instead of working here?
Simple answer would be the resources. NASA is definitely a lot more resourceful. I think we look at the kind of equipment, at the tools, at the funding they get, at the kind of connections that they have with other space agencies all over the world. And I think as an individual, it would make more sense for you to go to an organization that's already developed than stick with an organization that is currently developing. In case of India, well, ISRO just started off very recently, if you think about it. And I think they have a very great pace going on. We're doing very, very great in terms of the development. But the problem is that right now, even ISRO is more aerospace specific. So there's not a lot of astronomy research as compared to NASA. And so for an individual, it's definitely a lot more attractive to go to a place where there is a lot of research happening, there is a lot of groundbreaking discoveries and all of that happening. So yeah, I think if I personally was asked to choose between an already developed organization that is providing you a lot of opportunities versus an organization that is still developing, for my personal growth and interest, I would definitely prefer NASA.
That was actually pretty unexpected because when I was reading and when I see the memes, or Instagram or anything like that, this 40% Indians is this information is very common, and a lot of people blame Indians because or say NASA is developed because of Indians or anything like that. And that might be true at some level, but a lot of people blame that you are not staying in your country and anything like that. So when you said as an individual, it was pretty, unexpected, which is true. Obviously, whatever you said is absolutely true. But this answer was I was not expecting this at all.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what your preferences are. I do know a lot of people a lot of researchers that I am in touch with, they did go abroad, they did work with international organizations, and then they came back because they figured that it made a lot more sense to develop the organizations of our country. And so I think it's an individual preference. I mean, if you do have the amount of energy and patience it takes to come back here and develop your country's organizations, then I think we do need more people like that, because we do have a lot of potential. We have had a lot of growth as a space agency in the last few decades. And I think with the right amount of guidance and direction, and with the right amount of talent, if it's staying back in the country, we will definitely be on par with NASA in no time. But again, comes down to, like you said, 40% of Indians. So if so
Yeah.
many people are going, so there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it comes down to sometimes you just prefer your individual growth over, the entire nation's growth.
Well,
It,
yeah.
yeah,
That's true.
it's a personal
Yep.
choice.
Yes. So nowadays, everybody is curious to know about the black holes and neutron stars. Can you just elaborate that point?
Yeah, I think what makes them really fascinating is the fact that they're very strange objects. If you think about black holes, well, even light can't escape from it. That's one of the first things we hear when we think about a black hole. That's what we've been taught since school, and it is very strange and fascinating because the first question that comes to mind is, if it doesn't escape, where does it go? What happens to all of it? And this has been probing a lot of scientists for a lot of time. And this is what has made it particularly interesting for as a topic of research. Similarly, for neutron stars, so neutron stars are essentially stars that have only neutrons. And if you've studied in chemistry as in school, the first thing that we've learned is that for an atom to be stable, you need neutrons, protons, and electrons. So when you think of a body that has only neutrons, the laws of physics change, the laws of chemistry change, and there are a lot of bizarre things that keep happening in those bodies. And so that is particularly why a lot of people are interested. And I think another reason why this is a very important topic of interest for scientists, particularly, is that it gives a lot of insights into cosmology. Because a lot of black holes are very, very old. So when you study them, you can also study about the evolution of the universe as a whole. And it is also, these objects are so massive that they are directly related to how general relativity works. So we want to theorize general relativity, and in order to be able to prove the existence of a lot of general relativistic concepts, we need to be able to study uh, uh, these objects with really high energy and high mass, and they have very, very complicated laws of physics. So I think that is why there's been a lot of interest in these objects.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Great.
let's talk about time travel. Like I saw, I think that you might be a little interested in time shift and time travel. So do you believe in time travel per se?
It's definitely a very fascinating topic to think about, but given our current knowledge of physics, it seems it's not very likely. Sure, we have hypothesized a lot about it. We've seen a lot of movies where they're discussing time travel and all. But I think fundamentally, time travel would mean that you're traveling faster than the speed of light. And if you talk to any scientist who has studied general relativity, or any researcher who's currently pursuing general relativity and special relativity, they'll tell you that that is not possible, because it is one of the biggest violations of the principle of general relativity. Um, However, time travel is in the sense that when we click pictures of the universe, and when we're looking at the universe through the telescope, we're essentially traveling back in time. So if that is the kind of time travel that we're talking about, then yes, that's definitely possible. But if we want to go to a different point in time, and if we want to interact with our sons and our daughters and all of that, I think that I'm not really sure if that is very likely given our current knowledge of physics.
Yeah.
Time travel and I think teleportation. These are the two topics which are, very hypothetical, but they have so much hype and so much, interest that even if it's not possible, everyone's thinking about it. So I wish
Yes.
it were like
Yeah.
that.
That's very interesting topic.
It
Everybody's
is.
excited about that time
Yeah, I
travel.
think there is a lot of research going on. So scientists are trying to combine astrophysics with quantum physics
Yeah.
because given the new theories that are coming in quantum physics, if we are able to combine the two of them and try to find some link between time and space where we're able to navigate through time without violating any of the time laws, then I think it could be a possibility. So we'll definitely find out in a couple of decades. I think that revelation is very, very close. We will
I'm
know
keeping
about
my
it very
fingers
soon.
crossed. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
We'll
Yeah.
see about it soon, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what about time sheet? Like, does time matter to one who is you're experiencing time sheet?
What exactly do you mean by timesheets?
I mean, like, when a person is experiencing, do you think that, time matters? If someone is, like, for example, how do you say this?
So the time as per one's perception, are you saying relative to another person's?
Right, right.
Uh, I think after a point it doesn't really matter because time as it's perceived by you is very different from time perceived by somebody else who's moving with a different speed. However, for your perception, your biologically also your body is just functioning as per that time. So even though if you look at it relatively, say you're traveling on a spaceship and because you're traveling with very high velocities, time for you will be running extremely slow. However, you sitting in that spaceship will not really be able to tell that it's running slow. For your body to perceive it, it will just be like a very normal passage of time. And the only time you'll be able to tell that it is your time is running slow is when you compare your time with somebody else's time. And usually uh, given our current limitations, we can't physically we cannot attain such high velocities that we're seeing such a significant difference in the time perception. So even the closest that we see is some difference in microseconds or milliseconds, for satellites that are orbiting the Earth or for spacecraft that have gone beyond the Earth into deep space travel. So I think after a point, it's not really a concern because we are not able to attain such high velocities in the first place.
Okay. So
So,
as the topic is time travel, so is the universe is expanding or it's just our definition of length and time that are changing?
It's definitely expanding. So
Okay.
it is definitely expanding. Yes, we have a lot of scientific evidence for that as well. And even if you, so we've already established that time and length are relative. So despite that, we have still seen evidences of the expansion because this we have noticed by looking at the deep sky through the telescopes, and we have noticed that there is a certain pattern. Things are moving away from each other. The wavelength of lights that we are receiving are redshifted. So even if keeping the definitions of length and time relative in your mind, you'll still see that there are very fixed proofs that the universe is expanding. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's definitely expanding, yes.
Yes. Okay. So what do you think about the sci-fi fan or some fantasy movies about time travel or space?
What do I think about them? I think they're very cool. I think for people to have such wild imaginations and be able to come up with concepts like that, it's very, very cool. And apart from entertainment, movies like these also help in popularization of science. Some kid watching these movies would think, okay, maybe I want to be a scientist. Of course, it's a different thing. He'll later
Yeah,
grow
yeah.
up and realize that all of that was just very hypothetical. But it definitely helps in getting people interested in science because normally if you talk to somebody, they'll tell you that they find science boring or they find science difficult. So that's where things like movies and books and all of that come into the picture, and they definitely help create that spark of interest among people. So I think, yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah. Some kids can
I
get the
completely
motivation.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was interested
Yeah.
in astronomy because of Star Trek. I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard it
wow.
or not, but I was
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
interested in that. I started the series and I ended with the movie. So I was so fascinated with that. Then I started researching, okay, what is this? What is that? And then, gradually then started watching movies. So yeah, it was very nice and very interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think movies are definitely a very good starting point to get people interested in science.
Yeah. Who
Yeah.
knows, someone can be a scientist by watching this.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be so easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Well, the way in which you talk, you kind of remind me of that web series. It's The Big Bang Theory.
I do.
It was like, yeah, you do. Like
Wow.
I remember you are the combination of Leonard and Sheldon and
Oh my
Ted.
God. No,
Yeah.
I'm not even close. Thank you very much, but not even close.
It kind of. I was just thinking about that. Okay, these are the three combinations that I can think of. So yeah,
Wow,
definitely that.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's very flattering. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, what do you think about faraway spacecraft? How do we talk to them?
There is something called the DSN, which is the Deep Space Network. It's basically a combination of all these radio antennas. So communication definitely requires antennas, and in order to communicate with satellites that have traveled extremely far into space, we use this DSN network, and these antennas, they transmit and receive radio waves. Radio waves are the that it's the most commonly used wavelength for spacecraft communication. And so with the help of DSN, we are transmitting and receiving these radio signals, and that's how we communicate with a lot of deep space spacecrafts. And the thing is, right now we don't really have many deep space spacecraft. We know of one, that is Voyager. I think it created a lot of hype when it went past Pluto. And even to communicate with Voyager, there is a lot of time delay. And while we're not directly communicating, we are still able to obtain all the data from the spacecraft, and we're able to put it together with the help of our own analysis and databases. So far, the equipment that we commonly use is the DSN. That is all we have right now.
Okay. And how much time does it take to make a spacecraft?
It really depends. It depends on a lot of factors. So if you have a spacecraft that is having a well-defined structure, like you already know what's going where, what is happening. If you are not really looking for anything innovative, then I think it's a very quickly doable job. It won't take a lot of time because you already have well-defined parameters, you have historical databases, and all you have to do is put it together. However, if you're looking to come up with something innovative, something new, then it takes a lot of time. It can take a lot of years, maybe even a decade. So really depends on what is the purpose that your spacecraft wants to serve. If it's something new, or if it's just say it's a typical spacecraft that has to go somewhere and collect images and or collect some data. So we already have a trajectory that we have been defining for it for a lot of time. And so in situations like that, we don't really need a lot of iterations and thinking to be done. So yeah, comes down to the working efficiency, comes down to the workforce, comes down to the mission statement that we want to accomplish with the spacecraft. So anywhere between a couple of years to a decade, depending on different parameters.
All right. Okay, so again coming to black hole. So every center of a galaxy have a massive black hole. So does the gravitational collapse that happened to billions of years ago in the same today?
Uh, can you come again? So
Uh,
what about yeah, so there is a black hole at the center of every
yeah,
galaxy. Yeah.
gravitational
Mhm.
collapse that it happens billions of years. Is it same today?
So I'm guessing you mean about the gravitational collapse that's been happening over time, right? So
Okay.
the accretion rates. Yeah. Uh, I think it definitely varies over time, because over time your black hole is accreting more matter, it's consuming more stars and more objects, and it's getting larger. And it's definitely getting less stable in terms of energy because of all the accretions and rotations around it. So yeah, I think it is varying. It is varying with time. It also varies with the kind of objects and matter in the vicinity of the black hole and the kind of matter it is accreting.
Okay.
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 So now I have this one question which I am very excited about. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
every single person will,
Every,
everyone is going to ask that question. I am sure about it. So what do you think of aliens?
Oh, definitely. Let's see. When I think of aliens, for me, it's a more the definition of alien for me would be something that any kind of organic matter that has the ability to just sustain itself. However, if we're talking about aliens in the context that we see in movies, I'm not very sure that I'm supportive of it, because there have been a lot of theories where people have tried to formulate, even mathematically, there have been a lot of theories where people are trying to tell that what is the probability that they exist, and if they did, if at all they did, then why are they not here yet? And so I think it's a very it really, at this point, I don't think we are scientifically at the verge of finding out very soon. However, we are seeing a lot of organic evidence of organic compounds on different planets, even within the solar system. So if that fits under your category of aliens, then I think, yeah, they do exist. But if we're looking for somebody, green colored bodies with antenna and all, I'm not very sure of that. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So then what about pyramids? Like, it's said that pyramids were built with the help of aliens. Like there is this myth or rumor or whatever it is, and it's been circling for so many years. So what do you think of that then?
I have heard that rumor. I think while it makes sense, because we haven't really seen something like the pyramids being constructed anywhere else. But if you look at stuff like, there are the pyramids in Egypt, and then there's Stonehenge and all of that. While it does seem very fascinating, I think we as humans are capable of building something like that by ourselves. If you look at all the innovations that we've had so far in all of these years, and if you look at our capabilities as a species, do you really think that we're not capable of building the pyramids? You really think we'd need help of aliens for that?
Well, not really. I would personally need help with from aliens and that, but I don't know about that.
I think it's a good enough story, because we still haven't figured out how exactly they've been made. But personally, I am of the opinion that I think we were capable of building something like that, even at a point back then. I think we've just missed out on a lot of historical evidence, or it's just been erased. But yeah, I think we are capable of building. Um,
Ancient theories.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. So you can raise
Yeah.
your hand or you can text us on WhatsApp too. So I think we already have one question. So let's
One
start with
question.
that. And others you can all obviously ask if you have any questions, or you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you. Okay? All right. So our first question is, what are the, okay, in a, if you want to be in an astronomy field, and what else do you need? Like, for example, if, for example, I want to do a master's in that, an astronomy field as per se, not aeronautics or not anything else, only astronomy. Then what are the things that you need, like for masters, at least, if you know?
Yeah, I think I have spoken about this with a couple of people, and in order to pursue your master's in astronomy, you need to understand, first of all, that it's a pure science field. For students who want to make a switch from engineering to pure science, it can be a little tricky because you don't really have a lot of physics background after 12th. The most physics that you've learned is in 12th, and since then you've diverged towards engineering. So the first thing that I would recommend is that you try to get your physics right. Try to look at the curriculum that is taught in BSc Physics as per the Indian college curriculum. Or if you're looking at some foreign curriculum, you can look at what is taught in their BSc Astronomy and Astrophysics programs. Because India does not really have a BSc in astronomy like other countries do. So my first recommendation would definitely be to get your physics concepts right. Secondly, because we are from an engineering field, for students like us, it would make a lot more sense to try to get into the data analysis side of it, the data science and data analysis, because telescopes on a daily basis generate a lot of data. There is a lot and a lot of data. And scientists always need somebody who can analyze all of that and who can discard the data that is not of any concern to us and work on data that is of importance. And so data science in astronomy is a very, very up and coming field. There is a lot of scope for data science roles in astronomy. So if you don't want to get into the pure research aspect of it, you can definitely take up data science, data analysis, deep learning, and all of that have significant applications in astronomy. So you can pursue that further. Um, I would also recommend that you try to be a part of, research projects, or if you have a bunch of people that share a collective interest in astronomy with you, then you can just come up with some tiny little research project of yourself. You can take up the help of a lot of open source data that is available, and you can try to work on some projects that show some experience. You can get internships, try to email professors. So emailing professors and working in their research groups, working under their research expertise will definitely help you build significant experience that you can leverage later to pursue your master's degree. Yes, these are the few things at the back of my head. And yeah, definitely be a part of workshops, take up courses, try to increase your knowledge as much as you can in these fields.
Okay, so Prasad has one question. Prasad, you can unmute yourself. We have allowed you to do that. Hello, Prasad, can you hear us?
Prasad?
I think that's okay. All right. So moving on. All right. I have one question, which is basically related to timesheet. Okay. So, okay, wait, let me form the question properly. I was kind of focusing on the what you were saying, and then I was not able to. I had that question when you were talking about timesheet, but I didn't want to interrupt Bhagesh, so I didn't say anything. Okay, so let me remember what that is. Until then, if you have any questions, Bhagesh, you can ask.
Yeah. Okay, Prasad. Okay, just a second. I will make Prasad a presenter. Okay. Okay, Prasad. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Prasad. Yeah, you can ask question.
Hello Bhagesh. Hello Sakshi.
हाँ
Hello ma'am.
प्रसाद. Yeah.
First of all, ma'am, your work is so inspiring to us, and it's really good to hear from you. So I have I have two questions already. First one is you you have talked about aliens. So you said that any organic matter that can sustain itself in this universe, it will be known as alien or species something. So my question is, if we means we know the organic matter as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen bonds. So if there is any living form in silicon based life or phosphorus based life, so it will known as alien species or not. So what is your opinion on that?
So first of all, I would like to clarify that alien is a very commonly used term. So when we talk in terms of science, we talk about living matter versus intelligence. So intelligence, we're not very sure of. Now coming to living matter, you did mention compounds like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. Phosphorus and silicon are also a part of it. And so I think that if you do have a phosphorus or silicon based life that is integrated with carbon, hydrogen, and other compounds, and if it is able to sustain itself, then I think it does come under the category of living matter. Uh, However, we won't be sure if it is intelligent, if it's able to perform a lot of life functions. But as long as there is a combination of these organic elements, and as long as it is creating proteins and able to sustain itself with the help of amino acids and proteins that it's creating, I think it does come under the category of living matter.
Yes, like Drake's equation and all. So ma'am, my second question is, we know in quantum physics there is uncertainty of particles that are present in everywhere in the universe. So in the space, quantum physics says the space is not really empty anytime. There is always possibility that any particle exists there. And in the vast space, there are at every time of instance there are some reactions going on, like matter and antimatter annihilation simultaneously. So there is Hawking radiation concept. In that concept, the statements are at the what we can say, in the black hole at the event horizon. At the event horizon, we basically sees the Hawking radiation. In that Hawking radiation, the positive particles, positive matter, goes outside, and the negative matter is consumed by the black hole itself, and thus the radiation is formed. So, my question is, if antimatter is get consumed by this black hole into the singularity, so what what are the chances that this Hawking radiation could be formed by these positive particles and not this antimatter at all?
Um, so you did mention that quantum physics says that there is a probability of particles being everywhere.
Yes.
However, quantum physics also states that so after you get a probabilistic curve, you're looking at the peak of the curve, and then you're saying that okay, within this bandwidth, within this range is where there is a maximum possibility of a particle to be. Even though you do have a probability curve, you won't really look at the entire curve. You're discarding some parts of it because the probability of matter existing there is very, very less. So, unlike your classical physics, where you do have discrete body systems, in quantum physics, we are employing this probability model. However, for the sake of convenience, for the sake of mathematical ease, we do pull out only like a small part of it, and we are trying to discreetly tell, that maybe it is available, the particles are present at this particular place wherever the probability curve is at its peak. Um, so extrapolating that to your Hawking radiation, there is a possibility that your antimatter number one is already annihilated before it is being observed. That is one thing that I can think of. Another thing that I can think of is depending on whether, like you asked, if it's possible that the radiation can comprise entirely of positive particles. So I think it comes down to the reactions that happen before that singularity. And I'm not sure how well equipped we are to study that at the moment. I think there are certain scientific research that is being conducted right now to study Hawking radiation. I know one of the researchers who at IIT Indore who is working on one of these things. So I'm not really sure about the positive radiation, but I think that at this point we don't really have evidence of this kind of radiation.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, it was question from Alan Guth. Alan Guth, you know about Professor Alan Guth?
Yeah, I've heard, yes.
Yes. From that lecture, MIT lectures.
Okay.
Ma'am, another question is, we detect these gravitational waves. So we know about wave-particle duality. So, so we detect the wave. If there is any chances to detect gravitons or bosons that conduct these gravitational waves.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear what you said in the end.
I said, are there chances to detect gravitons throughout these waves?
With respect to the gravitational waves?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so first of all, you need to understand that gravitational waves here are essentially energy. And so what we detect is basically a sound. So with the LIGO equipment, what we're doing is we are extracting all of this energy and trying to put a sound to it. So what we end up with after the entire LIGO project works is that we end up with this one graph that gives us the amplitude of the sound that we perceive after a certain passage of time. So all that the equipment is meant to do at this point is get you the sound, and it is that sound, it is that graph that is analyzed. So we right now, the equipment cannot detect particles because all we're doing is we are looking at interference and then we are mapping out the amplitude over a given period of time. So even if there are gravitons, this particular equipment is not designed to detect them. All we can do is detect the stretching and squeezing of space-time.
Okay, ma'am.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Okay, so Tejas has a question. Okay, are you done, Prasad, or do you have some more questions? Okay, I think he's done. Tejas has some questions. Tejas, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I just want to ask you about the colliding black holes. So when the two black holes actually collide, is it any effect on the singularity between the two black holes? Because time travel through 4D, okay, and if the time goes in the black hole, it bends the time into 2D because singularity is all about 2D, two-dimensional. So can colliding black holes affect the singularity of a particular black hole that has mass greater than the other one?
So when black holes do collide, they ultimately collapse into one. So definitely, I think there is an effect on the singularity. But after the collision, you end up with one black hole. So if, under any case, there is going to be an effect on the singularity and on the time, because both the black holes are merging into one. So yeah, I think that there is definitely an effect on how time runs and how the singularity and the event horizon of the black hole changes throughout the merging process.
Ma'am, does the event horizon actually changes or not? Because
Yeah,
it does.
when two black holes are merging, there will definitely be a change, right? There is a physical change. There are two black holes merging into a single one.
Okay, then the mass will be get affected and also the singularity.
Definitely, yes.
And there are this black holes in the center of the galaxy, as you know. So they are formed billions of years ago, as per the theories. So the gravitational collapse of that intensity, is it still present now, or it still exists now? Because scientists have also found a replica of a black hole that is as same as the previous one. So it is the same gravitational collapse intensity that we have found today.
So of the replica in terms of the actual black hole, or are we talking about the same black hole throughout time?
It's a different black hole, second one.
Okay, I think the intensity will vary, right? Because the black hole is different. The intensity will vary, especially if you're trying to replicate that. You won't really be able to replicate the vicinity of the black hole. Does that make sense? So you're replicating the black hole, but the vicinity, the parameters that need to be taken into account during accretion and during the gravitational collapse, that also needs to be replicated properly in order to get the same amount of intensity.
Okay, ma'am. And does the quantum entanglement, the particles that are quantumly entangled, can travel faster than speed of light?
I think this was a paradox that was brought up while discussing quantum entanglement, and it is a paradox because it's not really violating. So the first thing that comes to mind is if you have two protons with different rotation and you put them at
Yes, that
different
is
corners of.
up straight and down straight. Okay.
Yes. And if you do put them at two different points in the universe and you think that the information is traveling faster than the speed of light, but I think it is a paradox at the end of the day because the principle is not really being violated. I think there is some explanation for it. I do remember reading about it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's definitely not, the information isn't moving faster than the speed of light. It is not violating the Einstein principle.
Can darkness travel faster than light? Because light travels at the speed of basically 3 lakh kilometer per second. So besides that, there is totally darkness, no presence of photons are not there. So can we consider the darkness travels faster than light?
Depends on what you perceive darkness as, right? If darkness is essentially all of the area that light is not able to cover, in my opinion. And so I think that darkness just it's existing, and then as light moves you're able to cover all of it. So I think light, the velocity of light, we're talking in terms of time here, whereas darkness is just, we're talking in terms of the space, it's the area that we're talking about. So I don't know if you can make a comparison between the two of them, but if you yeah, I think when we are comparing the space, the area of the darkness versus the traveling speed of time. So if you want to talk about darkness in terms of time, then I think it still comes down to your time, your light, whatever it's not able to cover, that is the darkness, right? Does that
Yes,
answer your
and it's
question?
also expanding more at the speed of light actually.
Yeah, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
And can you differentiate between dark energy and gravity as such?
Okay, yeah, so gravity does, so when you look at how galaxies are rotating, how the arms of galaxies are rotating, um, you would think that gravity by itself in order to conserve the angular momentum, it would be such that the speeds will have to change with the radius, right? So when you have a distance, when you have your black hole at the center of a galaxy, and then you have stars and other objects away from it. So as the distance increases, the velocity needs to change. However, this is what you get from the theory of gravity. But what we've noticed is that the change is not how we're expecting it to be. And so that's where dark matter and dark energy comes into the picture. So these are uh, components that we haven't really been able to detect properly yet, but we have detected that they do have a certain impact on how the galaxies rotate. So when you bring your dark energy and dark matter into the picture, we're able to explain that, okay, this is how the galaxies are rotating. And this would make complete sense if we had some extra matter and some extra energy in the place.
Ma'am, what if two planets are rotating more than the sufficient speed that they have to rotate, and they are not going, or they are not drift out in the universe? Means they are still in the orbit. So the energy that is holding that two planets in the orbit, can we name it dark energy? Because we have no scientifically proved that gravity is only holding that two planets that are rotating more than the velocity of that is sufficient.
I'm not quite sure I can comment on that at the moment, because it's not really a very simple answer. You can't just tell that maybe it's not gravity or maybe it's dark energy. It would require a lot of hypothesis. So I really can't comment on that at the moment, but I think it is a possibility. Really comes down to the scientific evidence.
Okay. So
Okay, so
all of us.
there's
I'll
one
tell you.
last question in our chat box. So, what are the opportunities for ECE students in field of astronomy?
Lots of opportunities if you want to get into the instrumentation part of astronomy. Astronomy is essentially a lot of data and a lot of instrumentation. We want very precise, high quality electronics and instrumentation to design the observatories, the telescopes, and all of that. So, as an ECE graduate, also, you do have a lot of opportunities to get into astronomy. You'll have to make sure that for your masters and your further higher studies, you're trying to get your field of interest inclined towards that. You're trying to specifically work on projects, astronomy related projects that require you to have better quality instruments. For instance, I can speak for LIGO India. I know that we do require a lot of high quality precision instruments, right from the laser equipment to the mirrors and all of that. So you do have a lot of opportunities as an ECE student in astronomy. You will have to keep checking with the observatories. I think in India as well, in IUCAA, there are openings for students to be a part of projects, actual projects that they are working on, if you're able to demonstrate enough experience. And these are all astronomy based projects. So I think you can go through their website and have a look. There are definitely many opportunities.
So thanks. Thank you. I think Neha had that question. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Akshat for the vote of thanks, because it's time now. And we were literally hoping that we were on kind of a time crunch, because we know that for example, Tejas, the guy who had the latest guy, he has so many questions for you. Like, he had a list of questions for you that I'm going to ask this, I'm going to ask that, you have to ask this. So we are even now we are kind of on the time crunch. So is it okay if we ask you questions through text, on LinkedIn or maybe somewhere else?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you can get in touch with me. I think if one of you can just share my LinkedIn account details as well as my email ID, I think I can get in touch with all of you. Anybody, if you have any questions or anything you feel I can help you with, please do reach out to me. I'll definitely try to help.
Okay, great. So
I just put your URL on WhatsApp group, so everyone can.
Yes, you can also share my email ID. I think
Yeah.
you have them. Yeah.
Yeah. I have that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'd like to ask Akshat for the vote of thanks for that. We can do the-
Yeah, sure. Now I would like to present the word of thanks. First of all, thank you, Nishita Sangvi, for accepting our invitation on such a short notice. We were really grateful for such an amazing event and for your honorable experience session. And I am sure that the participants will try to implement the ideas that you shared today. I would like to thank our faculty coordinators, Mrs. Vandana ma'am and Praveen Godke sir, to guide us through all the curves to land in such an amazing event. I would also thank our team Dhruva for the dedicated work throughout the event, and at last the lovely audience that were patient and interactive in this session. Thank you so much everyone, and stay safe. And now I would request all the BODs to just open the camera so that we can have the photo of this amazing session.
You can give Bhagesh have to give access to everyone so that they can turn on the camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second.
So it's a great session, Nishita. I had a lot of fun, by the way. So
Thank
thanks.
Yeah.
you very much. Thanks a lot for having me, you guys. This was fun. Thank you so much. I really hope you keep having a lot more podcast sessions that I will definitely attend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we will have
Yeah.
definitely. Okay. Did you give access to all of us?
Just a second. Yeah, everyone has done. Darpan?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone can just.
Okay. Can you, everyone, please unmute, turn on your camera so that we can take a snapshot, and then after that, then we'll end this event.
Yeah. Yeah, done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Nishita.
Thank you, Nishita.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thanks a lot. And everybody who's attending, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm available on my email ID that has been shared, as well as you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm hoping
Yeah.
you all had a great time. If there's anything else that you would like me to help with, please let me know.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
We had a lot of fun.
Definitely.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. See you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Even we'll send you all the links afterwards.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
I'll just end. Bye. I'll just end the meeting.